being opened by Grahasta couples as they were traveling. Prabhupada made a point of saying how wonderful his Grahastas were. He said, my Guru Maharaj, he sent 2 sannyasis to London back in the day to open up a temple. And he was sending them money to stay there, but still they couldn't open up a temple. He said, but he sent 3 Grahasta couples there. And of course, they opened up the temple in London. They, Shamasundar and Mukunda, they had attracted George Harrison to the temple. He purchased the property, which became Bhaktivedanta Manor for Srila Prabhupada there. George Harrison, of course, gave one of the first donations to print Krishna book. All of you, if you've seen the first volume of Krishna book, you'll see there's a statement by George Harrison. So in this way, he sent Govinda Dasi, her husband, Gursundar, to open up a center in Hawaii. These things were not easy in those days. There was no Indian community that you could preach to who were eager to do such a thing. And there was no money. And Prabhupada's method was you just go and depend on Krishna. And somehow or other, by Prabhupada's desire, by his potency, and by the surrender of his disciples, they were successful so many places all over the world. So when Prabhupada came there, and after leaving, he told Govinda Dasi, Govinda Dasi is famous. She's the only devotee mentioned in a purport in Srimad Bhagavatam. I don't know which canto it is even in, but he thanks her for bringing Tulsi Devi to the West. And again, until that time, there was no known Tulsi Devi. So she brought seeds to Hawaii. And Hawaii, much like Mauritius, which is one of your neighboring islands here, Tulsi flourishes in Hawaii. You can see 8 foot, 9 foot, 10 foot tall Tulsi Devi plant, and equally as wide. We would have, in those days, I was temple president for some time, we would have 1 day a week where all the devotees in the temple, after class, before breakfast, everyone would get a pair of scissors, and we would have to cut manjaris. There were so many manjaris. They would make garlands for Lord Chaitanya every day. So he told Govinda Dasi to make Gurnatai deities. This was, Prabhupada was so innovative. And he didn't arrange to send marble deities, or bell metal deities, brass deities, wood deities from India. He said, you make Gurnatai deities. And they were this size. They were from the ground, they were this big with their hands in the air. Prabhupada would send instructions by letter showing them how he wanted their hands, how he wanted them facing, how they should be dressed. He told them there in Hawaii, like in Mayapur, that they could go shirtless because it was tropical. So they made these deities out of paper mache. I don't know if you know what paper mache is. Basically, that's what it is. It's paper and some kind of gluey substance, a paste. So it was a big project. So after some time, and they would send photographs as they were progressing, doing Lord Nityananda, Lord Chaitanya. And then after much time and some difficulty, a lot of anxiety, they had Gurnatai deities finished. And then Prabhupada said, very good. Now you can do 3 more deities. So he gave them Panchatattva. He gave them the Panchatattva deities to complete it. So this was the first temple in ISKCON. 1972, they were installed. It was 1972, yes. The first Panchatattva deities installed in what was New Navadvip. So this was all by Srila Prabhupada's arrangement. And again, she brought Tulsi Devi there. So this This was the beginning of ISKCON Hawaii. And Prabhupada went there very often. He said, if there is heaven on earth, it was in Hawaii. When I was in Mauritius just recently, Prabhupada also went to Mauritius. And I heard he went there some months after you had a cyclone in Mauritius. So even the palms, the coconut palms, there were many of them were nothing there. The tops were just trunks going up. So after going around the island many times and seeing everywhere just sugarcane fields everywhere, Prabhupada looked at the devotees. He said, Hawaii is better. He actually said 2 places. He had 2 favorite places. He had many favorite places, he would say, but one time he said 2 favorite places. What were they? Anyone know? I've already told you. Hawaii and Juhu, because they had coconuts. Prabhupada was very fond of coconut water. When he would come to Hawaii, the devotees would fill up the brahmachari ashram with a big, like a pyramid full of coconuts. So every day he would have his coconut water. As I said, I went back to 1975. So I became his servant. One of the first places we went to, we stopped in the Hawaii Temple. And that time he had to stay in a hotel, Ilokai Hotel. Not something Prabhupada liked to do, stay in hotels. If there was a room in the temple, no matter what the condition was, he wanted to stay in his room. Krishna Balaram Mandir, Juhu Temple, even they were 60% finished, 70% finished, he'd say, I'm staying in my quarters. So then they would rapidly have to go in, clean things, paint things, get everything ready for him. Because he much preferred to stay in the temple. So I was talking about 1975. By this time, there was one devotee in Hawaii who joined through the preaching efforts of the devotees there. And his name at the time was Sai. And he had practiced, he was born and raised in Hawaii. He was a Western person, white, Caucasian man, young man, like we were all young in our 20s. And he was Kundalini. He had become master at Kundalini. He also burned out his Kundalini, I think. But he had a following. Over 100 people were following him. So he became a devotee. He became initiated by Srila Prabhupada, and he brought all of his people to Srila Prabhupada. And they were sent to different temples all over the USA, 2 to one temple, 2 to this temple, so many temples. Pushkar, one of our artists, one of famous artists in ISKCON, he came through Siddha. His name, Prabhupada initiated Siddha Swarup. And within a year, Prabhupada gave him sannyas. He became Siddha Swarup Ananda Goswami. So he had a disagreements in ISKCON. He thought we were, especially with book distribution, he thought our methods were much too aggressive. So he didn't care for these methods. And gradually, he kind of drifted away. Before it happened, Prabhupada always knew he was going to do his own preaching. Prabhupada was okay with that. Prabhupada was not greedy for disciples. But he wanted that he knew what to say, what to do, how to preach properly. The conclusion, as Prabhupada said, is how to be ISKCON. Prabhupada set up ISKCON a very special way. So he wanted Siddha and his followers to understand the philosophy, to speak purely, to not water things down, not to change things. So it was when I went to Hawaii with Prabhupada, it was in September, beginning of October 1972, he had Siddha Swarup and 2 of his very close associates that he also gave sannyas to travel with him for 3 months, just so they would hear him and understand how to preach. And so from the very beginning, Prabhupada could see what many of us were unable to see, that they had to understand the philosophy. And so now it was 3 years later, they were still part of ISKCON. Definitely, faction was beginning. There's letters, Prabhupada said, please don't make a faction. Prabhupada never wanted to see his ISKCON society divided up, so many different viewpoints. And we say diversity, unity and diversity. Prabhupada wanted that unity there in his ISKCON society. So now it's 1975, and very much there's struggles going on between the various factions that had developed. And again, Siddha Swarup, his group, they were very attached to him personally. Of course, this happens. We become attached to personalities, have a personality. So he brought all of them to God consciousness, so they were attached to him. And now, of course, he's sannyasi for some 3 years. So I joined Srila Prabhupada on this trip. I'm still with him, 1975. It's over 2 years later. And we're in the Hawaii temple that Ambarish Prabhu had purchased for Prabhupada, just so he had a nice place to translate. And Prabhupada would stay there sometimes for over a month. And he would translate, not just early in the morning, he would translate through the day, he would translate in the evening. Because it was a small island in the middle of nowhere, it was very peaceful. Not that devotees were flying in from all around the country, because it was far away. So it was an ideal place. The climate was excellent. And of course, coconuts were there. Dabs, Prabhupada would say dab. Sometime in Juhu, the other favorite place, after lunch, Prabhupada would take a nap for half an hour, 20 minutes like that. And he would walk out of his, then he had a flat on the second floor. And this was before the temple was there. So after his nap, he would just walk to the bathroom. I would be in the hallway. That was my room, was the hallway. And he would just walk towards the bathroom. Didn't even look at me. But I would just hear these words, Dab. And I would bring in his coconut. We had a gold straw that we would put in the coconut for Prabhupada, put it on his desk. So it was one of his favorite beverages, was his Dab. He would say, Dab. So in Hawaii, there's much discussion going on. There's GBC of Hawaii, who comes from Los Angeles. Every morning we're on the morning walk. You can see these pictures. Prabhupada walking a place called Magic Island. Different places he would walk on the beach. Very beautiful it was. And then, of course, he would come back. So one day, we came back in the morning. Prabhupada didn't speak in the morning, he would sometimes speak in the evening. So this Siddha Swarup Maharaj, he gave class in the morning. And Prabhupada was there on the Vyasasana. His picture was there, not a Murti at that time, picture was there. And Siddha Swarup was on an asana to give class. So there were many of Prabhupada's disciples there, including Siddha Swarup's followers, who were also Prabhupada's disciples. So of course they adored Siddha. So I was there for the class in the morning. And I noted when the Siddha went and he sat on the asana to do Bhagavatam class, a devotee came in, one of Prabhupada's disciples, and he had a garland. And he put it on Siddha, Swarup. But Prabhupada didn't have a garland. Anyway, I just noticed. So then later on in the afternoon, Prabhupada called Siddha in for a discussion with his god brothers, the other devotees, because they had issues with some of the things he was doing. And now he was a sannyasi, remember. He was not just brahmachari grahasti, he was sannyasi for 3 years. So we're sitting down. Prabhupada always had very, not always, when he wanted, a very diplomatic way of speaking. So he didn't say directly, he said, they say. Say, some are saying that you're traveling around the world and you don't carry your danda. And he said, well, yes, Prabhupada, he said, it's very difficult. He said, traveling on the plane, having the danda, he said, it's sometimes they get trouble. And Prabhupada pointed to his secretary, Paramahamsa Maharaj, also had a danda. He said, he's traveling with me all around the world. Everywhere he goes, he carries his danda. So that was first point. So then he said, and they say, what did he say then? Or no, he looked at him. He didn't have a shaved head. And he said, you're sannyasi. He said, but you have hair. Your head is not shaved. And he said, well, I don't shave my head. He said, because sometimes I get a cold. And Prabhupada looked at him. He said, you're in Hawaii and you get a cold? So then I was sitting there. I never open my mouth. I just sit. You say sometimes, the expression, you're like a fly on the wall. In English we say fly on the wall. You're just there observing everything. You're just a fly. You have no business with anything. But I said, Prabhupada, I said, this morning, I said, you gave class. And your disciples were all in there for the class. And I said, one of your disciples, they put a garland on him. I said, but you didn't have a garland on the Vyasa-san. I said, so I didn't think that was appropriate. And Prabhupada looked at him. He said, he has a good point. And then Siddha said, well, Prabhupada, he said, my speaking, he said, is not so effective. And then Prabhupada looked, he said, then if it's not effective, why are you speaking? And this was, from the beginning, Prabhupada wanted him to understand what to do, how to speak, how to follow Vaishnava etiquette, everything, how to do everything. Prabhupada showed us everything, all examples of how to do. Anyway, I just thought of that when they offered me a second garland. My god brother, this is our business. We understand this. I've always heard it, my guru god brothers, they'll always say, some of them say, sometimes they say, you treat my god brother as you treat me. That's our business. Whether we like it or not. And sometimes it's very awkward. We don't find it particularly enjoyable, but it's also a duty. As Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said, sitting on the Vyasa-san like I forget the word he uses, but it's a heavy, like animal. He said, accepting garlands, but it becomes a duty. One has to understand what to do, how to train each other in Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada was expert in everything. So I was going to speak. What time do we go to today? Is there 12:30? Okay. So I was going to, since I'm just here for one class, I was going to tell a little story about Prabhupada traveling. I did this at PMB. He went, this was also 1975. It was a very 1975 means Prabhupada has been in the West for 10 years. First year, he's studying. Prabhupada said, I was studying your culture in America, how to preach, how to spread Krishna consciousness in the West. So now, 10 years later, Prabhupada left Juhu in January, and in 2 months, he went around the world. And he ended up in Mayapur, the beginning of March, for Guru Purnima festival. But what happened was very, very special. I'll tell you the cities he went to. He went from Juhu, his first stop was Japan, then he went to Hawaii. He's traveling east. He went to Hawaii, then he went to Los Angeles, then he went to Mexico City, then he went to Caracas, Venezuela, then he went to Miami, then he went to Atlanta, then he went to Dallas, Texas, then he flew to London, then he went to Tehran, and then he ended up in Mayapur. So he went to a dozen temples in 2 months. See, this was Prabhupada's amazing ability. 2 months. 1975, he was already 79 years old. But he was acting like a youngster, traveling around. I see now, we've been traveling for how many weeks? Maybe 6, 7 weeks. It's not so easy. No matter how nicely you're taken care of, and we've been taking very nice care of, nice places to stay, wonderful prasadam, the devotees are all very caring, very wonderful, like a family. But still, it takes a toll on the body. But Prabhupada would say, when you're engaged in devotional service, you never become tired. Whenever I see that, his writing like that, I wonder, what is it I'm doing? I always feel tired. One time he called up, 1 o'clock in the morning, he was in Vrindavan. This is Krishna Balaram Temple. He rang his bell. He said, go get Guru Kripa. Guru Kripa, he was responsible for giving most of the money to build Krishna Balaram Mandir. So I got Guru Kripa, we both go in together, sit down, offer obeisances. And Guru Kripa looks at Prabhupada, yes, Prabhupada. Prabhupada says, why are you sleeping? It's 1 o'clock in the morning. He said, why are you sleeping? He said, I was tired, Prabhupada. He said, why are you tired? He said, I'm not sleeping. Guru Kripa said, well, you're a Paramahamsa. He said, why aren't you a Paramahamsa? Go and go take rest. That was all. They just called him this. So as we're traveling around, I don't know how far I'll get in all of this, but I'll just tell a few stories. So first stop was Japan. Japan, Prabhupada told one of his servants, Sudama Maharaj. If you've been listening, those of you remember Sudama Maharaj, I watched him give massage that first day that I didn't have to as Prabhupada's servant. And then he went to Japan because Prabhupada told the devotees, one of the first times in Japan, whoever opens up a temple here in Japan, Lord Chaitanya will personally take them back to Godhead. So Sudama said, I'll do it. So that was Japan. And now it's just after so many years of just being kind of like this, it's now starting, devotees are coming in Japan. Prabhupada said there'll be the best devotees. He said there'll be the last ones to become. He said, but there'll be the best devotees. We know our one Banu Maharaj. He came a long time ago, but such wonderful, strict, wonderful devotee. So after Japan, now he's flying to Hawaii. USA, Hawaii is USA, even though it's an island in the middle of the ocean. It's part of the USA. So in the pocket in front of the seat, there's Time magazine, Newsweek magazine, like that. So these were the big, even international. Definitely in the US, it was the most popular, well-known magazines. And also around the world. So there's a picture of women. They're all, arms are up in the air. They're protesting women's liberation. They even had a fire behind them. They were burning some of their clothing, certain articles, because they were liberated. So Prabhupada's sitting in his chair and he's just looking, always at the window seat. And he's looking at the magazine, Women's Liberation, it said. Prabhupada had many discussions. They would, in the 70s in the USA. One time it was in Chicago. So they made sure they had a woman do the interview just to make disturbance, just to let him know women can do anything a man can do. So the woman who was doing interview, well, she was a woman. The one behind the camera, she was a woman. The other one, what do you call them? With works all the wires and cords and everything. Anyway, they were all women. just this show. Women can do anything. So the women doing the interview, of course she asked Prabhupada what he considered a silly question. So why do you shave your head? And Prabhupada looked at her. She's in a miniskirt. This is 1975, so she's got a skirt way, way up. And Prabhupada looked at her. He said, why do you shave your legs? He said, he said, you keep a cool head, warm legs. So then it went on, and Prabhupada said, 16-year-old man, boy, parents will send him out, he can travel anywhere in the world by himself. He said, would you do that with your 16-year-old daughter? So she couldn't say anything. There's a photograph in my book, which I don't have any copies here. Prabhupada and I looking at each other. Prabhupada, smile, big smile, big smile. He's asking me. He said, what happened? I said, Prabhupada, you just defeated her. Because she had no response. She had a 16-year-old. Who here would send a 16-year-old daughter off on their own? No one with any intelligence. Even a 16-year-old son. But we know Vedically, 16-year-old son becomes your friend at 16 and no longer under your control. That's a Vedic concept. So anyway, on the plane, young stewardess is walking down. Most on the airplanes, these stewards, there's some men, many women. So she's young, stewardess, and she's walking down. And Prabhupada pokes his disciple next to him. He said, tell her she wants to be liberated, shave her head. And she's still walking down, and the devotees are hurting. He said, go on. He said, cut a joke. He said, tell her she can be liberated. Tell her to shave her head. And he couldn't do that. He was too embarrassed. So then Prabhupada visited Hawaii for a few days. He stopped in Los Angeles for a few days. And then the tour really began. Because the U.S. was the first place he had brought Krishna consciousness. New York, very quickly, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Montreal, Canada. But now he goes to Mexico City. Mexico, different country, very different than the USA. Very different culture, different people, everything different. But he goes to the temple, and there's hundreds of devotees in the temple room. They have Radha Krishna deities. So Prabhupada's seeing how successful things have become. And he's speaking. And every temple he goes to now, as he works his way back to Mayapur for Gaur Purnima, he's talking about Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. And his speaking, in most places, becomes a little choked up as he's seeing this Krishna consciousness movement. He spread it all over the world. He had done it 10 years. 10 years of working, traveling around the world 13 times by this time. He was soon to come here. That would be the next place. He would put his lotus feet. So all of you would come. Just by his stepping on these places. Temples, everywhere he stepped, you have a temple. It's not an accident. It's the outcome of a pure devotee turning these places into tirthas. Everywhere he went became a tirtha, a holy place. So in Mexico City, one of the first times I saw him, he's being translated by Vidayananda Maharaj because he's speaking in English. But all these devotees, they speak Spanish. So this was a wonderful thing to see it in another country, different culture. And not just young people, there were the young people's parents, people in their 40s and 50s and 60s, very pious people, Mexicans very pious. So Prabhupada speaks about the importance of utilizing this lifetime to become Krishna conscious. So at the end of the life, you remember Krishna. So at the conclusion of his lecture, one lady, elderly lady, we would say, she was